Welcome back to 110 Daily. Thank you so much for making us part of your day. Josh and Chris here on a Tuesday with you, starting hour two. Chris, Santa was listening. I asked him to get Blake Snell out of Tampa Bay, and then it actually happened. How about that?
How about that? It was, I would not. The Padres not a surprising destination. I think we talked about what the Angels that'd have been an
Mm-hmm.
interesting one as well. But yeah, the Padres not a super stunning destination, but what they have done over the last 24, I guess maybe 48 hours now is just unbelievable. It's hard to know even where to begin. They've acquired Blake Snell. They've none of these trades are official as far as I know, unless it's happened within the last hour. None of these trades are official yet, but they've been widely reported that they have acquired or about to acquire Blake Snell and Yu Darvish, along with a star Korean infielder Ha-seong Kim, who hit 30 homers in the KBO last year, a decent catcher in Victor Caratini, and they did it all without giving up a single one of their top seven prospects, according to Baseball America. I mean, this is unbelievable what they have done to transform that team in such a short period of time. They made a huge splash at the trade deadline and going out and acquiring, among others, Mike Clevenger. Clevenger is now out for the 2021 season with following Tommy John surgery. And so they say, okay, we're going to need a little bit more pitching now. So they could have gone out and signed they could have signed Jake Odorizzi or something. Like, oh, here's a guy, a stabilizing force in a rotation. But no, they decided instead, we'll just go out and get two of the top 15 pitchers in baseball. You Darvish, I think, in my mind, a top five pitcher in the game. Blake Snell, a top 15, if not top 10 starting pitcher in the game.
You think Darvish is better than Snell?
They're yes, yes, easily,
Wow.
yes, yes,
Okay.
easily. There's no doubt in my mind, in my opinion, Darvish is better than Snell. Now, maybe the length of that contract or their time with the Padres might go differently because Snell is like 28, Darvish is like 34 now. So as far as long-term prognosis, I might project Snell. Also, the money that Snell is owed over the
Mm-hmm.
next few years versus the money that Darvish is owed. I would rather have the rest of Snell's
Sure,
contract
sure.
than the rest of Darvish's contract. And I think maybe even if I was projecting the next 3 years for both these pitchers, I might, which they have the Padres now have both under team control for 3 more years. I might project Blake Snell to have the better 3 years collectively. But if you're asking me who I want to start a big game right now, who I want to be my ace right now if I'm starting a team, and you tell me, forget the money, who do you want for this season, for one season to be your ace? I'm choosing Darvish over Snell, no question about it. I think
Interesting.
he was I think he's made a legitimate change. Now this is not the Darvish of a few years ago. I think he has made significant changes that make him a better pitcher. Like I would not have called Darvish one of the top five pitchers in baseball 3 or 4 years ago when
Mm-hmm.
he was a strikeout machine, but he wasn't posting a super low ERA. Like I think he's made changes that make him a top five pitcher in baseball. I mean, was he was the runner up for NL Cy Young this past year. I might have even given it to him over Bauer. I would have chosen Bauer, but I considered Darvish because of the
Yeah.
season that he had, and I think it was legitimate. I think he's made some legitimate changes. I don't know how it's going to fare for him long term, but he has an incredible pitch selection, incredible I can never say this word repertoire um, to turn to that I think will make him be continue to be successful into his mid to late 30s. I'm high on Snell as well, but he also has injury risk as well. Snell's had arm problems. Darvish has too. But Snell, we also just haven't seen him be a pitcher. And this is just sort of a big thing for me and a sort of an aside from the bigger takeaway for the Padres. But until we see a pitcher prove that they can be a workhorse, that they can be a guy who goes out and pitches 7, 8 innings a night, and not every pitcher is going to be this way, but until somebody proves to me that they can be a workhorse, I don't believe necessarily that they can. And that's the thing with Snell is we
Mm-hmm.
haven't seen him. He's had injury issues already, and he's never really been a guy who is a guy who goes out there and gives you 7 inning starts. Now, maybe he can do that. Maybe he can be that guy. He's still young. He's not an old man. It's not like he's out of right. It's not like he's a 40-year-old pitcher who's running out of gas. Like he's could absolutely be that guy, and he also doesn't have to be that guy for it to be a great move. But with Snell, that's the thing. It's one of the things you combine that injury history with um, just the fact that we haven't seen him be that guy who could go out and give you those big, those lengthy starts to really eat innings for you. on a team where maybe they don't have the kind of bullpen and that kind of system that the Rays have. But anyway, I digress into specifics. As far as the Padres overall, I want to tell you, I want to bring up a few things and get your see what your reaction is to it, Josh. First off, their 2022 rotation, because Clevenger's out for
Yeah,
this year,
right, right.
is going to feature could conceivably feature you Darvish, Blake Snell, Mike Clevenger, Dinelson Lamet, Chris Paddock, and oh by the way, that's five guys, but we don't even have room for the fact that they have the top starting pitching prospect in baseball in Mackenzie Gore, who there's not even a place for in that rotation at this point now. They'll trade somebody or Paddock will go to the bullpen. It's not a big deal. But they have all those guys and also the top starting pitching prospect in baseball. And they didn't have to give him up to get any of those guys. Uh, Under team control, and you look at this core that the Padres now have. The following players are under team control for at least the next 3 seasons. Take a deep breath here. Fernando Tatis Jr., Manny Machado, Blake Snell, Dinelson Lamet, Will Myers, Trent Grisham, Jake Cronenworth, Chris Paddock, Austin Nola, Mackenzie Gore, and Yu Darvish. All those players are under team control for at least the next 3 seasons. Mike Clevenger and Eric Hosmer for the next 2 seasons. This is a team that, look, the recent history of baseball tells us that the Padres aren't going to be able to build this super team that lasts for a decade or whatever. Like, recent history tells us that probably in 5 or 6 years from now, it'll probably have to rebuild again. It's just the way that these things are generally working, unless you're the Dodgers. There are very few teams that have been able to sustain this incredibly a super team sort of thing for more than a 5 or 6 year stretch. We're seeing the Cubs kind of falling apart right
Yep.
now in front of our eyes.
The Yankees,
And right,
went through it and have not gotten back to the right, because your contracts get bad because you got to get the guys extensions, and yeah,
right. So eventually Machado's going to get his production's going to drop off. He's getting older. Tatis, you're going to have to sign to an extension. Like, you have to pay him more, right? These young pitchers just aren't going to stick around forever. After these 3 seasons, right, all those names I just mentioned would conceivably be, it's not going to play out this way, but it would be free agents, and they're going to get big money. Like, you can't just keep all these young stars forever without paying them. At some point, they're going to hit the free agent market. So the bigger point, though, eventually, 5 or 6 years from now, whatever it might be, the Padres may be in a rebuilding period. But this is as confident as you can possibly be about the next 3 or 4 years of Padres baseball being outstanding year after year. This is an incredible core. This is an incredible starting pitching. This is probably the deepest group of starting pitchers in the majors right now. There are injury risks. I could dig into all these different things. You combine that with that offense, they have Tatis and Machado and Hosmer and all these different names. They add, I think, an underrated move that they made was the signing of Ha-Seong Kim, who out of the KBO, who, as I mentioned, a star from the Korean baseball organization. He's a career 294 hitter. He hit 30 home runs in 138 games last year. He's going to be their second baseman, it appears. And that means that one of your runners-up in Rookie of the Year voting, Jake Cronenworth, who had an outstanding season, he doesn't even have really a place to play right now. They have an overflow of talent offensively. Now they have this incredible starting pitching depth. And the Padres are just in this sensational position. They're taking advantage of the fact that, right, and we could talk about the Cubs and the Rays a little bit, because I certainly have thoughts on those, but I've already been rambling a lot. But they're taking advantage of the market. They're taking advantage of the fact that teams like the Cubs, like the Rays, are looking to cut costs or looking to not have their costs rise. They're looking to reset or retool or whatever it might be for each of those organizations. There are very few teams that are willing to go out there and spend money. The Padres have also an incredible farm system that they still have a top five farm system, despite all of these moves, which tells you, one, that the teams they traded with, that they worked with, were looking for more salary relief than prospects. And it also tells you that they had an incredible farm system to begin with to work from. And they're willing to be aggressive. AJ Preller has always been aggressive. This is his thing. This is not a stunning sort of thing. But the Padres have made it very clear, I think, that they are a top 2 team in all of baseball, not just the National League, with these moves. What say you, Josh?
it's interesting, the perception of AJ Preller, because this is what he's always done. But the first time he did this, everybody applauded him, and this being a general term for being aggressive and spending a lot of money. and
Right.
trying to turn the Padres into a relevant team. The first time he did it, it was an absolute disaster.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
he was applauded at the time. It's, oh, look at all Justin Upton and Matt Kemp, and look
Yeah.
at what the Padres have done.
Right.
And then it sort of happens naturally because you got Fernando Tatis Jr. and you built this farm system. Then you
Right.
sign Matty Machado, who's intrigued by the potential of this team and growing with it as he's still in his prime. And then all of a sudden you have this really good team that kind of came naturally that you fielded last year. So then it's okay. We're close. These guys aren't going anywhere. We still have
Mm-hmm.
all these prospects. We can't play 25 guys a night. We don't need all of them.
Right.
They're going to pay Fernando Tatis Jr. as much money as he wants, assuming he's willing to stay a Padre.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're not in danger of losing. And you already listed all the
Yeah.
guys that they have under control for the next 2-3 years. So now you just go expend these pieces you don't need from your farm system, and so now AJ Preller is a genius again. It's just funny to me that we kind of go back
Right.
and forth and maybe the difference is, at least for me, and I'm curious whether you agree. The difference is that this one came naturally. This was not just
Yeah.
spending money in free agency to spend money. You had some
Mm-hmm.
pieces. You realized you had an opportunity. You were trying to avoid what's happened to the Angels, where you're just wasting this transcendent players. And I mean, Tatis isn't even in his prime yet, but wasting these years where you have him under control for an extended period of time. So then you go spend money on Machado and you spend money on Eric Hosmer, and then it's all about leverage. Because exactly like you said, you can just go right. You can just go to Jed Hoyer in Chicago and say, "Look, you want some payroll to get you want somebody to get off your payroll? We'll take you, Darvish. But
Mm-hmm.
here's the conditions on which we're doing it. You're not getting Mackenzie Gore. You're the
Right.
one that's trying to cut salary. We don't need you, Darvish, especially after we just
Right.
traded for Blake Snell. And the Rays are always willing to trade Blake Snell because they don't want to pay him. It's just who the Rays are.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this beautiful position where you have an aggressive GM with leverage, and you're absolutely right. You can't guarantee anything in this sport. Just ask the Dodgers. But this is about as good as it gets, and they are loaded all over the place. And it's not. And the other part of this too is, at least right now, it's not with terrible contracts. Right now, Machado's will be bad eventually because that's when every free agent contract like that is bad eventually. But
Mm-hmm.
Blake Snell's and Darvish's is going to get pretty bad. But
Mm-hmm.
Blake Snell's isn't bad. You've got all these guys that eventually you're gonna have to pay. But this isn't just spending for the sake of spending like the Yankees. And I guess that's the difference from the first time they tried this to this time. But I'm fascinated by the AJ Preller at angle to this because all of a sudden everybody's praising him and he's been generally maligned. At least I feel like since the first time they tried this, and then they've just been bad until last season.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's an interesting, that you bring that up because right, he's always, this is his MO. He's an
Right.
aggressive GM. But I think you're right in that a lot of times in the past, he was trying to just make this team good overnight
Mm-hmm.
by signing these stars who were in the back end of their prime and hoping that they can just, they can flip a switch. He'll hand out these big contracts and, right, like when they first signed Eric Hosmer, there was this idea that he was going to be this huge game changer for them. This has been a few years ago. And until last year, they weren't really a competitive team with Eric Hosmer. But right, they signed these big pieces, and I think there was this expectation that he can just sort of, that if you have an aggressive GM, that he can just make a bunch of moves, sign these stars that are in the back end of their prime, that their better days are not necessarily ahead of them, and that's going to transform the team overnight. And that's a formula that doesn't work. What a formula that does work is when you look and you look down and you say, wow, look at this young core that we have that makes us a good team. From Tatis to, hey, look, Will Myers is bouncing back. He's figured something out. To at all these young pitchers that we have and look at all these prospects that we developed. And all of a sudden, we have one of the best farm systems in baseball. When you look and say, we have the young core and we have the prospects to work with, now they could have what separates them from other teams right now is the fact that there are a lot of teams with really good young cores, but they looked and they said that's not enough. They could have done basically nothing at the trade deadline. They could be doing very little this offseason, and they would still be a very good baseball team. But they said, let's not sit here and say let's just accept being a good baseball team. We've got the pieces here to be a great baseball team, to make this incredible run over the next 3, 4, 5 years. And they said, yeah, let's do it. Let's not just sit here and hope that and be this team that's 5, 10 games over 500 and just hope that we get lucky in the postseason and that the things line up. Let's take this into our own hands and be a legit challenger to the Dodgers, to the very best teams in baseball. Let's not just sit here and say, well, we're a good team, and good teams sometimes win the World Series over great teams because it can happen. Let's be a great team. And we have the resources and the ability to do that without destroying our farm system, without spending a ton of money because of the situation that they set up and the leverage that they have, and the fact that they're taking advantage of this offseason, the situations with the Cubs trying to, sort of rebuild, retool whatever they're starting right now, and the Rays' tendencies to just sort of never stand pat and say, we're going to just, keep chugging along and run it back. That they're really taking advantage of the market. This is just sort of the perfect storm for the Padres. Um, and I guess a couple of thoughts I just want to share here before we end this segment. I'll pose this question to you, Josh, too, because this is a question I've wondered. At what point, if you're the Dodgers, do you start to get really scared?
I mean,
Because, I would say you're at that point right now.
yeah. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the Houston Astros.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have all the natural pieces that sort of come up through your system, Altuve, Correa, Bregman, etc. And then you add Justin Verlander, Zach Greinke, etc. on top of that. If you're the Dodgers, you're scared, but I also just don't think the Dodgers are scared of anybody.
Right,
if that
right.
makes
I don't
sense.
think that they're actually not actually scared, but you're looking there and saying this is the best competition to us that we've had in the better part of the last decade.
The only reason I wouldn't go there yet is I want to see this team on the field.
Sure.
That they haven't actually done it, but right on paper, in terms of when you're looking at this from Andrew Friedman's perspective and saying, we know we have the best roster. We have that this is ultimately a disappointment if we don't win because we know we're the best team in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
That is in question for the first time in. I guess since maybe that Houston Astros team.
Yeah.
But I would even argue it's still. But that would at least be as far. I would be willing to go at least that far back. Right. Oh, and especially in the National League. Right.
Right.
That regardless of how the postseason played out, it was a question of win or bust for the Dodgers.
Mm-hmm.
There was no, we were really good and they were really good and they just happened to have a better series. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, this is on a different level. I would completely agree with that.
Yeah, it's going to be very fun to see this team in action. I'm not sure I'm willing to make this bold claim. I'm not willing to make any sort of bold prediction that the Padres are going to win the NL West or anything. But if I look, I did this last night. I looked at these teams' depth charts now with these new additions with Darvish and Snell added into them. I'm not convinced that the Padres aren't the best team in baseball on paper now. Right now, this is very much subject to change because the key with all of this is almost all the top free agents remain out there. Dodgers could sign DJ LeMahieu tomorrow, and it wouldn't stun anybody. And all of a sudden, right, and they haven't brought back Justin Turner or not brought back Justin Turner yet. But I'm not 100%, there's so much offseason to go, and there's so many of the top players out there to land in different spots. But I'm not convinced that the Padres aren't far and away the best, most well-rounded team with the fewest obvious holes in baseball, even over the Dodgers.
Yeah, it's close.
Yeah. And I'm not making any bold prediction or anything yet. We got. One of the things I'm always like is we got to wait for the chips to fall in the off season because there's so many impact players out there. There's so much more that could happen. Chris Bryant could be traded tomorrow. There's just a million things that could happen.
That rotation though is where I'll buy into sort of what you're saying. Especially in the regular season, because I feel the downside to it is that it gets a little bit more difficult when you go down to 3 or 4 guys for the postseason. But if you're asking day in, day out over 162 game regular season or however long it might be this year,
Mm-hmm.
Look at the problems the Dodgers had after you got past Kershaw and Bueller.
Yeah.
Then you're talking about Chris Paddock and the other guys that were on the core of the starting rotation last season, because you just
Mm-hmm.
moved two guys ahead of him in the rotation. It's it's a loaded team and it's a fun team,
Yeah.
which
It's
is
going to be
another
fun to
added
see.
bonus.
Yeah, it's a really fun team. I mean, this was already, I think, the most fun team in baseball. Maybe they had some competition with them, like the White Sox or something, but this is already like one of the most fun teams in baseball, and they just got even more fun. So yeah, we're about. I know we're running over on this segment. I will say just this real quickly, kind of here to close it out from the Cubs and the Rays perspectives. These are teams that did similar things, but they're in different positions, right? For the Cubs, this is what a salary dump in a pandemic looks like. They just dealt the NL Cy Young runner up for a largely salary relief. They traded their ace for a back of the rotation starting pitcher in Zach Davies and four prospects who are both like 21 or younger. We're not going to make the majors for at least 2 or 3 years. So that kind of shows you what the new Cubs front office regime is looking to do. So I think this is one thing where the Cubs offseason is far from over. It's going to be interesting to see what they do because they may need to be in a complete rebuild, a retool. I don't know if we're going to call it a complete rebuild, but wouldn't surprise me to see some guys getting traded there. And then the Rays, this is what they do, but I also don't think that should give them a pass for the fact that they just were 2 wins away from the World Series and then just traded their ace on a not too expensive contract
Right.
instead of just saying, well, let's add a piece or two and make another run for it. So I wrote about that. I'm not going to get into all that, but it's one of those things where the Rays are probably being smart, but also that doesn't mean that they're being particularly fun either when they do this kind of thing.
Yeah. It's the ugliness of being a small market team.
Yeah,
To me they've earned the benefit of the doubt that they every time they do this they still deliver a good baseball team.
sure.
As frustrating as it is that you feel like they could have won a World Series if they just would have put a little money into it at this point with all of the players they've developed. But you can sort of
Yeah,
spin it both ways.
yeah. I guess
As
it
long
depends on
as
like. Go ahead.
as long as they're good, I can't be too upset.
Yeah, that's true. That's
They're
true.
not compromising competitiveness.
Right. They're not compromising competitiveness. They're just compromising trying to win the World
Right.
Series, trying to make
Right.
themselves trying to win the World Series.
Yeah.
Frankly, right? They're making
Yeah.
themselves their odds of doing that worse. They're sort of always playing it out. Let's be good and let's also plan for 2 or 3 or 4 years from now,
Yep.
rather than let's try to make ourselves elite to win the World Series now.
Yeah.
For what you know. So
Busy times in San Diego. Take a quick break. When we come back, more baseball talk. Since last week's Christmas list worked so well, we're going to do our New Year's resolutions for the sport of baseball. You won't want to miss that. You're watching 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.